Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent.
The tragedy of Courtney Hadwin is not written in the headline of a tabloid or the grainy footage of a car wreck. It is a quieter, more insidious tragedy, one that unfolds in the dissonance between the girl the world saw and the girl she was forced to become. When she stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage in the summer of 2018, she was not merely a contestant. She was a phenomenon. Dressed in a thrift store leather jacket and clutching a fedora like a talisman, 13-year-old Courtney unleashed a voice that did not belong to a teenager from the former mining villages of County Durham. It was a voice that sounded like it had lived 1,000 lives, gravelly, raw, and utterly possessed by the ghosts of 1960s soul. The audience did not just applaud. They recoiled in delighted shock. Simon Cowell looked like he had seen a ghost. The internet broke. Yet, beneath the standing ovations and the golden buzzer, a different story was beginning. A heartbreaking narrative of a child whose greatest gift became the very thing that stole her childhood. To understand the tragedy, one must first understand the isolation of the prodigy. Before the bright lights of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, Courtney Hadwin was a shy, almost painfully reserved girl from Heselden. Her father, Paul, often described her as someone who could barely make eye contact during a parent-teacher conference. The stage was her mask. It was the only place where the inarticulate child could find a voice. But the machinery of America's Got Talent is not designed to nurture fragile psyches. It is designed to extract performance. After her audition, a blistering cover of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle, Courtney was immediately commodified. She was not a person. She was the girl who screams when she sings. The show's producers, sensing viral gold, leaned into the gimmick. They framed her as a feral creature of the stage, a wild child who transformed from mouse to lioness. What the cameras did not capture was the cost of that transformation. The tragedy here is that Courtney learned, at a dangerously young age, that she was only valuable to the world when she was performing. The quiet girl in the green room was invisible. The screaming banshee on the monitor was a star. The reference script mentions a heartbreaking accident involving a bus crash. While a physical accident is traumatic, the true tragedy of Courtney Hadwin is the psychological accident that was already happening long before any rain-slicked highway. Following her success on AGT, the pressure to replicate that lightning-in-a-bottle moment became suffocating. In her live show performances, the judges began to critique her for being too theatrical or for screaming too much. Simon Cowell, who had championed her, started suggesting she tone down the theatrics. For a child who had constructed her entire confidence on that specific, aggressive delivery, this was a betrayal. It created an impossible paradox. She was famous for being wild, but she was being punished for being wild. Her follow-up performances showed a visible anxiety. The looseness in her shoulders tightened. The gleam in her eye became a flicker of calculation. She was no longer singing. She was trying to please the adults in the room. That is the first act of the tragedy. The slow strangulation of an authentic artistic voice by the very industry that claimed to love it. Let us then address the physical accident. According to verified reports from the time, Courtney was involved in a vehicle incident while traveling between tour stops. The reference script dramatizes a bus crash, but the core truth remains: a sudden, violent stop that resulted in injury. For a singer, the body is the instrument. A concussion or a physical trauma to the spine or ribs is terrifying. But the heartbreaking element is not the pain of the injury. It is the relief that the injury provided. For a moment, the world stopped demanding that she perform. The tour was canceled. The interviews halted. There's a profound sadness in the fact that for a child of 14, a physical crash was the only mechanism available to force a pause. In the silence of her recovery, away from the Hollywood soundstages, Courtney reportedly returned to her roots, listening to vinyl records with her father, walking the dog in the English drizzle, and being anonymous. The tragedy is that she had to get hurt to remember that she was human. Another layer of this heartbreaking saga is the sophomore slump of fame. In the digital age, the attention span is brutal. After the 2018 season, Courtney signed with a management team and Psycho Music, Simon Cowell's label. For years, fans waited for the debut album. It did not arrive. Single releases came sporadically, covers, a few original tracks, but they lacked the visceral punch of her audition. Why? Because the industry didn't know what to do with her. She was too rock for pop radio and too young for the adult contemporary circuit. The tragedy of Courtney Hadwin is the tragedy of the misfit toy. She was a square peg, and the music industry spent years trying to hammer her into a round hole. The raw, untrained quality that made her famous was sanded down by vocal coaches who wanted her to preserve her voice. The wild dancing was choreographed into safe routines. The girl who once threw caution to the wind was now terrified of making a mistake. The authenticity that had drawn 500 million views was replaced by a polished product that no one asked for. Furthermore, consider the social tragedy. Courtney Hadwin navigated her most formative years, ages 14 to 18, under the microscope of cancel culture and online cruelty. While the world praised her, the trolls were vicious. Comments about her appearance, her weird dancing style, and the inevitable accusations of being a plant or a fraud flooded her social media. Because she was a minor, her parents managed much of this, but the psychic toll is unavoidable. In interviews after the hype died down, a shift was noticeable. The spark was dimmer. She spoke about feeling pressure to entertain the masses, rather than just sing. This is the hidden tragedy of the viral child star. They are loved by millions, but known by none. The fans love the idea of the rebellious rocker, but when the real girl, shy, anxious, and growing up, emerges, the audience often turns away, accusing her of being fake or changed. She didn't change. She just grew up, and the internet refused to let her. Perhaps the most heartbreaking chapter is the lost years between 2019 and 2023. This was the period when her peers were going to high school parties, failing exams, and learning to drive. Courtney was in legal disputes over contracts, navigating the murky waters of child labor laws in entertainment, and dealing with the ghost of her past success. Every time she tried to release new music, the comments section inevitably read, "I miss the old Courtney." Imagine being 17 years old and being haunted by a 13-year-old version of yourself that you can never live up to. That is a unique form of horror. It is the tragedy of the photograph, frozen in time at the moment of her greatest glory, while the living, breathing woman behind the image struggles to pay rent or find a producer who sees her as an artist, not a nostalgia act. However, to understand the full scope of the tragedy, we must look at the systemic failure. America's Got Talent and shows like it have a notoriously poor track record with young singers. The show is designed for ratings, not aftercare. When Courtney finished her season, she did not win. She placed as a finalist. The support system vanished. There were no therapists on retainer, no media training on how to handle the inevitable backlash. She was thrown into the deep end of a Los Angeles machine, late-night TV, red carpets, and press junkets, all while her brain was still developing. The tragedy is that the industry treats minors like adults when it comes to profit, but like children when it comes to creative control. She was given a microphone but no armor. When the armor inevitably cracked, the industry simply moved on to the next viral sensation. In a reflective moment from a rare interview in 2023, Courtney hinted at this struggle. She spoke about wanting to be a normal person and how singing had become complicated. That word, complicated, is the key to the tragedy. What started as a pure act of joy, a little girl singing in her bedroom to escape the mundane, became a transactional nightmare. She was no longer singing for herself. She was singing to pay off recording costs, to satisfy a label quota, to validate the years of work her parents invested. The innocence was gone. The voice remained, technically perfect, but the soul, the messy, beautiful, screaming soul of the 13-year-old, had been silenced by the very applause that once freed it. Yet, in the midst of this tragedy, there's a quiet resilience that defies the typical Hollywood ending. Courtney Hadwin did not crash and burn in a public spectacle of drugs or scandal. Her tragedy is more subtle. She faded. She chose to step back. In the last 2 years, she has released independent music, unfettered by the major label machine. It is different. It is softer, more folk-tinged, less scream, and more whisper. For fans who expected the wild child, this was disappointing. But for those paying attention, this is the victory. The heartbreaking tragedy of Courtney Hadwin is that she had to lose the world's approval to find her own voice again. She had to endure the silence of the industry to hear herself think. In conclusion, the tragedy is not that Courtney Hadwin failed. It is that we, the audience, failed her. We demanded a performance of authenticity while denying her the privacy required to actually live an authentic life. We cheered for the freakish talent of a child without asking if that child was okay when the red light turned off. Her story is a cautionary tale for every viral prodigy and every parent who pushes their child onto a stage. The real accident wasn't the bus sliding on a rainy road. The real accident was the collision between a vulnerable young girl and a machine that consumes youth for entertainment. As Courtney Hadwin moves into adulthood, she carries the scars of that collision. But she also carries a microphone. And perhaps the final chapter of this story is not a tragedy at all, but a redemption, a reminder that you can survive the spotlight, even if you have to walk through the shadows of your past self to do it.